On World News Tonight this Wednesday, dawn of a Biden era. President-elect Joe Biden transition officially begins as White House signs off on Biden receiving daily intelligence briefings. A crucial pick. With almost 4 successful vaccines on the verge to be distributed, it's up to the buyers to make the right pick for the nation's cure. A struggle to help. With over 40,000 refugees entering Sudan, the UNHRC is facing logistical challenges to provide shelter to all. And the Grammy nominations. Beyoncé is on the lead, but can Taylor Swift win the Album of the Year for a record-breaking third time with her lockdown album, Folklore?
From Ada Derana News Headquarters in Colombo, this is World News. Reporting tonight from Studio 24, here's Mahesh Jani.
A very good evening, everyone. Good to see you back here on World News, and thank you very much for the privilege of your time. Well, we'll start off today's coverage from the United States. Our top story tonight, the White House has finally given the green light for U.S. President-elect Joe Biden to receive daily intelligence briefings. This means the transition process is formally starting, and as Biden prepares to take over, he announces his cabinet picks.
America is back.
President-elect Joe Biden introduced his new foreign policy and national security team to the world on Tuesday, saying the United States was ready to lead again on the global stage.
In fact, in calls from world leaders that I've had, about 18 of them or 20 so far, I'm not sure the exact number, in the weeks since we won the election, I've been struck by how much they're looking forward to the United States reasserting its historic role as a global leader.
With his team standing behind him, Biden said they would shed what he called old thinking and unchanged habits in their approach to foreign relations. Each of Biden's nominees, who were masked when not speaking, delivered remarks at the same podium, an aide wiping it down between each statement. Comments from Biden's pick for U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, reinforced Biden's intention to steer the country away from President Donald Trump's America First nationalism,
America First,
his antagonistic approach to NATO alliances, and abandonment of international agreements.
Paris Climate Accord.
Not long after Biden's event, Trump hosted one of the few annual ceremonies he has left as president, the pardoning of a turkey ahead of the Thanksgiving holiday.
Corn, I hereby grant you a full pardon.
Behind the scenes, Trump has been waging a losing legal battle to try to overturn Biden's victory, falsely claiming the election was stolen from him. Trump has said he will never concede the election, but his administration on Monday finally gave the green light for the formal transfer of power to begin.
I'm pleased to have received the ascertainment from GSA.
Trump's critics said the nearly 3-week delay undermined the incoming administration's ability to take on the many challenges the country faces.
The most feared law in Thailand is back in use after a 2-year break, reportedly ordered by King Vajiralongkorn. For more details on that story, let's cross over to Ada Derana World News special correspondent Avantika Gunasekar, who's standing by in Kuala Lumpur following events happening in Bangkok. Avanti?
Mahesh, Thailand has revived a controversial law against criticizing the royal family in an attempt to curb months of anti-government protests. Several activists have been summoned to face charges under the lèse-majesté law, which carries a sentence of up to 15 years in prison for each count. It is the first time in over 2 years that such charges have been filed. Its revival follows increasingly outspoken criticism of the king by protesters, in chants, on stage, and in what for many Thais is shockingly vulgar graffiti. This is something very new in Thailand. Even in previous episodes of political unrest, few dared to attack the monarchy. But this generation of activists insist that the spending and power of the king must be challenged. Thailand has been rocked by student-led protests for months, with demonstrators demanding charges to the monarchy. Protesters are also calling for constitutional reforms and the removal of the country's prime minister. A prominent student activist, 22-year-old Parit Chivara, has received a summons for lèse-majesté, among other charges, and at least 6 other key protest leaders, including human rights lawyer Anan Namba, are expected to face the same charges. Back to you, Mahesh.
All right, Avantika Gunasekara, the World News Special Correspondent reporting from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Thank you. Now, moving on to the updates on the coronavirus pandemic across the world, the number of COVID-19 cases worldwide has reached a grim milestone of 60 million. But a more positive development is that many countries are close to approving vaccines, accelerating the examination process so vaccines can be distributed as soon as possible.
Just 11 months after the first reported COVID-19 infection, the global tally has surpassed 60 million cases. That is the largest figure by Worldometer on Wednesday, with the global death toll standing at 1.4 million. There's been 10 million cases reported in the past 16 days alone, and the pace is getting faster. The hardest hit country is still the US with 13 million cases, followed by India, Brazil, and France. Yet, the race for the COVID-19 vaccine is also gaining speed. The U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar said on Tuesday that the vaccine could start being distributed soon after December 10th. That is the day that a Food and Drug Administration panel meets to consider emergency use authorization for Pfizer's vaccine. According to industry sources, South Korea is also in the process of examining AstraZeneca's vaccine candidate in an effort to accelerate the approval process. The industry watchers say that if the application goes well, then the first approval in South Korea could be given by March next year. The EU on Tuesday has also announced that it has made a deal for the vaccine with pharmaceutical company Moderna. The president of the European Commission said that the deal ensures 160 million doses.
We have some good news for you. As the Christmas holidays are approaching, the French president has announced to lay off some lockdown restrictions. For more details on that story, let's cross over to the World News Special Correspondent in Normandy, France, Chetana Dharmaratna, who's standing by with the late details. Chetana?
Yes, Mahesh. France will begin to ease its strict coronavirus restrictions this weekend, allowing non-essential shops to reopen. President Emmanuel Macron has said people will also be able to share moments with the family over the Christmas period, but he said bars and restaurants would have to remain closed until 20th January. France has reported more than 2.2 million cases and more than 50,000 confirmed coronavirus-related deaths since the start of the pandemic. President Macron said that the country had passed the peak of the second wave of virus infections. He said the bulk of lockdown restrictions would be eased from 15 December from the festive period, with cinemas reopening and the general travel restrictions lifted as long as new infections were at 5,000 a day or less. The recent news of successful vaccination trials offered a glimmer of hope, and that France will aim to begin vaccination against COVID-19 at the end of December or at the beginning of January, starting with the elderly and most vulnerable. However, if the situation has worsened, he said he would look at options to avoid triggering a third wave. Back to you, Mahesh.
All right, Chetana Dharmaratna, the World News Special Correspondent reporting from Normandy in France with that story. Thank you. As global pharmaceutical companies get closer to completing their COVID-19 vaccine development, buyers are left to choose which one is the most suitable. But how do we compare them, and what factors should we take into consideration? Let's take a look at the comparisons on the recently proven vaccines.
In the race to acquire COVID-19 vaccines, there are a few crucial factors to take into account: efficacy, price, and storage conditions. In terms of efficacy, the candidate by pharmaceutical giant Pfizer and its partner German biotech firm BioNTech is leading the way at 95% efficacy, followed by Moderna at 94.5% and AstraZeneca at 70% on average. However, AstraZeneca says the effectiveness of its vaccine can be raised to 90% by taking a full second dose after an initial half dose. Despite the relatively low efficacy rate compared to its competitors, what makes the candidate from AstraZeneca attractive is the price. Given that 2 doses are required for full vaccination, the AstraZeneca vaccine will cost around $5 to $10, significantly cheaper compared to that of Moderna and Pfizer. For a person to get 2 doses of Moderna's vaccine, it would cost at least $50. Another important factor is how easy it is to transport and store the vaccines. While AstraZeneca's remains safe for at least 6 months under regular refrigerator temperatures, Pfizer's needs to be transported at around -70 degrees Celsius and once defrosted, can only be stored for up to 5 days. Moderna's vaccine also has a shorter shelf life and is more difficult to transport and store compared to AstraZeneca's. As the development of the vaccines is getting closer to completion, buyers are left to weigh up the benefits of each. While some will be more effective, others could prove to be more practical.
Not only the Moderna, Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines, Russia also claims preliminary results for its Sputnik V COVID-19 vaccine, as it showed 95% effective from its second dose, and Russian citizens are to be given the dose free of charge.
Financial backers and developers of Russia's Sputnik V vaccine said Tuesday that the shot will cost less than $20 per person. And Moscow aims to produce more than 1 billion doses at home and abroad next year. The vaccine is administered in 2 shots, each of which will cost less than $10, according to the official Sputnik V Twitter account. For Russian citizens, though, inoculation will be free of charge. But on the streets of Moscow, some are still wary.
I don't want to be vaccinated at all, but I would have chosen the Russian vaccine if I wanted to. But at the moment, I did not even think about it.
Mass vaccination in Russia, which has the world's 5th highest number of COVID-19 cases, has yet to begin as so-called Phase 3 clinical trials continue. The Russian vaccine is cheaper than the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, but more expensive than the vaccine developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University.
We are going to take a short commercial break. When we return, we'll have more world news. France's lower house of parliament has given initial approval to a controversial security bill that would restrict the publication of photos or videos of police officers' faces, and has been vehemently criticized by press freedom groups despite protests from rights activists and journalists.
Opponents have called it a threat to France's standing as a beacon of human rights. But what's actually in the government's proposed global security law that's led to mass rallies up and down the country? The most controversial aspect of the bill would ban the publication of images which reveal the identity of police officers. Article 24 makes it illegal to publish images with intent to harm the officer's physical or mental integrity, an offence that would carry a penalty of 1 year in jail and a €45,000 fine. The text has whipped up widespread opposition from politicians to academics. Critics say the law would make it harder for journalists to do their job and would make the public think twice before holding police officers to account for excessive use of force. But police unions say the measures are necessary to protect officers and their families from harassment online and when they're on duty. Article 22 on the use of drones is another controversial part of the bill. It would allow law enforcement to use them whenever there are fears of serious disturbances to public order, a measure that the UN says could deter people from taking part in peaceful protests. The bill would also give officers the right to publish their own footage to give their version of events, a move that critics say would infringe on people's right to privacy.
The number of Ethiopian refugees streaming into eastern Sudan has now surpassed 40,000 since the crisis began, with more than 5,000 women and children and men fleeing the ongoing fighting in the Tigray region over the weekend.
Philemon says he never expected to be a refugee, but thousands of Ethiopians like him continue to flee across Sudan's border with the conflict-hit Tigray region, according to the UN's refugee agency. The UNHCR said on Tuesday that the number of refugees in Sudan had now passed 40,000, including 5,000 who escaped fighting at the weekend. Reports from inside Tigray are difficult to verify, and both sides have been claiming advances. On Tuesday, the UN's Office of the High Commissioner for Refugees expressed alarm at a build-up of tanks around the regional capital, Mekelle. Spokesperson Ravina Shamdasani.
The highly aggressive rhetoric on both sides regarding the fight for Mekelle is dangerously provocative, and it risks placing already vulnerable and frightened civilians in grave danger.
Shamdasani said the High Commissioner was worried such rhetoric would lead to further violations of international humanitarian law.
After the missile hit by Houthi rebels in Jeddah, oil giant Saudi Aramco says that customers were unaffected by the attack on a petroleum products distribution plant in Saudi Arabia's Red Sea.
Saudi Aramco said on Tuesday its domestic fuel supplies were not affected by an attack from Yemen's Houthi group on its plant in the north of Jeddah city. Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthi forces on Monday said they fired a missile and struck the facility. Saudi authorities later confirmed the attack. Aramco's oil production and export facilities are mostly in Saudi Arabia's eastern province, over 620 miles from Jeddah. The facility's manager Abdullah Al-Ghamdi at Aramco's North Jeddah bulk plant told journalists on a tour that one of the 13 tanks used for diesel oil, gasoline and jet fuel is currently out of action. A fire caused by the missile attack was extinguished in around 40 minutes with no casualties. Also on Tuesday, Saudi state TV reported that the Saudi-led coalition had destroyed 5 mines laid by the Yemen's Houthi group in the Red Sea. The channel said the mines are of Iranian-made Sadaf type.
Post-election violence that took place in Kenya in 2007 and 2008, which murdered almost 72 people, are to be investigated as the victims and families have come forward with their statement. However, it is unclear as to why the statements were brought out at this time.
Kenya is reviving investigations into 72 murders as well as allegations of forced evictions and arson during post-election violence in 2007 and 2008. That announcement was made by George Kinoti, head of the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, after victims and their families came forward to give statements. Fighting erupted in late 2007 and early 2008 after opposition leader Raila Odinga accused then-President Mwai Kibaki's party of stealing the election. Around 1,300 people were killed and hundreds of thousands displaced in some of the worst violence in Kenya's history. Current President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto were among 6 Kenyans charged at the International Criminal Court over their alleged roles. Both denied the charges and their cases collapsed due to insufficient evidence. It was not immediately clear why victims had now come forward with statements. Rights groups have in the past accused Kenya's political elite and police of stalling investigations into the perpetrators of the violence.
It's for us to prepare.
Kinoti said cases would be tried in Kenyan courts, saying the country's prosecution is very competent and that the criminal justice system would stand with the tears and cries of the victims.
Welcome back everyone to World News. Now, violence has continued in Afghanistan despite peace talks that began in September. Afghan president urged the international community to continue supporting Afghanistan even as he acknowledged that donors are likely to cut aid under the strain of COVID-19.
The Afghanistan Donor Conference comes at a pivotal moment for Afghans as the country continues to grapple with ongoing conflict and the coronavirus pandemic. President Ashraf Ghani is urging donors to continue their support. Afghanistan is aid dependent, and the country looks to donors to fund at least half of its annual budget. The previous conference in 2016 raised over 12 billion euros. COVID-19's effect on the nation is twofold. The country's economy has been battered by the virus, and authorities warn it is set to contract by more than 5% as a result. The pandemic has also stretched the pockets of other world economies, and now experts warn that donor fatigue could see cash pledges to help Afghanistan fall significantly. The ongoing fighting between the Taliban and government forces in the country could also threaten efforts to raise funds. Peace talks between the two sides are at a deadlock, and several key donors say that without a ceasefire, support to the war-torn country could be cut. The UN's World Food Programme warns that the coming winter months could see poverty in Afghanistan spiral. It says that the changing climate will mean that more than 5 million people face food insecurity.
And finally tonight, nominations for the 63rd Annual Grammy Awards was announced, with Beyonce leading among the nominees with 9, while Taylor Swift, Dua Lipa and Roddy Ricch followed Queen Bey with 6 nominations each.
Superstars and newcomers alike are among next year's Grammy Awards nominations. Beyoncé led the pack with 9 nominations on Tuesday, making her the second most nominated artist in Grammys history. Her releases Black Parade and Black is King celebrated black culture during a year of racial turmoil in the United States. British singer Dua Lipa, pop star Taylor Swift, and rapper Roddy Ricch all followed Beyoncé with 6 nominations apiece. But the biggest surprise was R&B singer The Weeknd being shut out from the awards entirely in what Variety called the biggest snub in memory. He dominated music charts this year with his critically acclaimed album After Hours and hit single Blinding Lights. The Weeknd fired back on Twitter, accusing the Grammys of being corrupt. However, this year's awards will mark a first for a South Korean group, with K-pop sensation BTS scoring their first major Grammy nod, with a nomination in Best Pop Group Performance for their song Dynamite. The Grammys will be hosted by Daily Show comedian Trevor Noah in Los Angeles on January 31st.
Prediction time. I'm going to say that Taylor Swift is going to make history by winning the Album of the Year for a third consecutive time. We'll wait and see. Well, that is a part of your will tonight. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow at the same time for another edition of World News. I'm Mahesh Jodia. Stay safe, stay well, and have a good night.